guys, and welcome back to another episode of the ADH Dads. I'm your host, CJ,
I'm JJ.
and today I am very excited. We have a very wonderful, beautiful, and special guest today, Miss Ayanna Davis. She has an online presence known as Phenomenally Autistic. She's an author, an artist, and an autism advocate. So I'm really excited to have her on and to talk about her journey today. We've talked about in previous episodes that, we've just gotten an ASD diagnosis here with our oldest, and she wanted to come on and say hi to Ayanna before we started here because we were watching some of her videos, and I told Naomi that, Ayanna is an author, an artist, and was showing her some of her work, and Naomi just lit up and says, my superpower is creativity and being an artist. So it just lit her up to see you and your confidence and your work, Ayanna. So that was really cool to see, and I'm just really excited to dive in here with you and talk about your journey. So how are you today?
I'm great. I'm great.
Good. So yeah, tell me about Phenomenally Autistic. What is this, and what do you do, and why?
Well, I am an autistic artist and a autism advocate. So I create art and I express myself through art. I express my advocacy through art. I'm a children's book author and illustrator. I believe since the last time we spoke, it was 23 books, but now it's 27. So I'm just churning them out. But I mainly advocate for more visibility of Black autistic women. When I write articles, that's what I write about. I feel like we're not given the resources that, other people are given when they're given their autism diagnosis. So that's what I advocate for most. And I'd like to see more articles about Black autistic women and um like I said, more visibility because I feel like everybody should get the same treatment.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that because before you hopped on with us too, JJ and I were kind of having this talk, and as we started our evaluation process with Naomi, that was something that we were told about from a few different pediatricians and evaluators. The statistics revolving around diagnosis with ASD, and then what that looks like in girls, and then what that looks like in girls of color.
Yeah.
And how lower those diagnoses can be. So yeah, why is that, or what's your experience with that? Why is the
Um,
diagnosis so drastic in that?
well, one of the reasons is that girls have better masking skills, which that's just basically being able to blend in better and hide your autism traits. And another reason is that since the face of autism is usually a white little child, you never really think that girls can be autistic. I was a late diagnosed autistic. I was only evaluated about 7 years ago, so I was like the senior citizen.
Mm.
I'm a millennial, so I was like the senior citizen of diagnosis. So, Black women are usually not diagnosed, misdiagnosed, or late diagnosed. A lot of times,
Yeah.
were diagnosed as bipolar or schizophrenic. I'm not either, but I was put on medication for bipolar, which
Mm.
actually like destroyed my body. My thyroid exploded and it just like really took a number on my body. And now I'm on other medications because of that medications that destroyed me. So we've been through a lot with just the process of like finding the medication to help just make things easier for me and help control my autism traits just so I can have a better quality of life.
Yeah. I'm interested to hear about that kind of later diagnosis too.
Mhm.
I recently went on a journey too. Our whole journey in our family started with we thought maybe Nami was expressing some neurodivergence and like ADHD tendencies. So we went to go get her evaluated for ADHD, which was a process too, and we had to advocate for her. through the school system. They didn't want to pay for it. They didn't think anything was quote unquote wrong. And I hate using
Yeah.
that
I
term
always say that. I was
wrong.
like, there's nothing wrong.
Exactly. Like, so let's discuss as we go on what better air quotes we can use for that other than wrong,
Yeah, I
but
always say that. I'm like, I always knew that something was different. And I was
yeah.
like, people always said something was wrong, but I knew that nothing was wrong with me.
Yes, we've never seen anything wrong with Naomi. We've just seen that there are some different ways of
Yeah,
analyzing the
different.
world and taking in information. So it just takes more effort on us as the adults to ask the right questions and to really kind of feed that curiosity. And so advocating for her through the school system was difficult and something that we had to be very persistent about. And I also started an evaluation process for myself for ADHD because it's something that I always felt I had, that was never really given the attention to. And as we started this process with her, I wanted to understand that evaluation process. I wanted to understand myself. So I recently got my own neurodivergent diagnosis as she's going along and getting hers. So I'm curious, like, what did that look like for you, and why did you decide to take that step later in life? What brought you to that decision 7 years ago rather than maybe 10, 15?
I actually wasn't pursuing it. It was an accident. I was in the hospital. I am chronically ill, so I was in the hospital, and I wasn't like responding to my doctors. I really wasn't speaking or making eye contact, or just everything was just I was just like kind of shut down. So they had a psych evaluation team come in, and I wasn't responding to them either. So then they brought like a whole treatment team in, and they did like a full evaluation. And then they came back, and they told my dad and they told my doctors. It was like, yeah, she's on the spectrum. So that's how we learned. And I was like, I'm not autistic. That's for white people. So like we just like didn't know anything about autism, because I always say this. I'm like, when you think of autism, you don't think of a black woman, like especially a black grown woman. You think of little white boys. So it was completely by accident. We were so taken back, and for a long time I was in denial. Like even a year later, I was still like, I'm not autistic, but that just made me suffer more. So when I finally accepted it, then I decided to go to the therapies, which my dad had to find because we weren't given any resources. It was like, here's your diagnosis, go home, have fun, live your life, but you're autistic. So my dad had to find therapies that worked for me, because we're not a fan of ABA therapy. So um, we
Can
decided,
you pause real quick and describe
yes,
what ABA therapy is for us?
yes, it's a therapy that I never get this right. It's an acquired behavioral. I can't get it. I never get it right, but I can explain it to you. It's a therapy where the children or the adult goes to, and they try to teach behaviors, like teach neurotypical behaviors and actually force neurotypical behaviors on neurodivergent children, especially autistic children, which has been proven to give autistic children and adults PTSD. So, a lot of autistic adults in the actually autistic community, we don't support that because, why continue to traumatize a new generation of autistic children? So, that's just one therapy that we don't support really in the autism community. So, my dad did find a few therapies that work for me, because sometimes you do need a few therapies. I'm about to start occupational therapy because of my sensory overload and my sensitivities to light and touch and taste. But the sound thing is like really kind of out of control right now. So I'm about to start occupational therapy, which is, I'm like, I don't want to go to that. It's for kids, but I have to do that. But CBT therapy, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, DBT therapy, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, and those were good for me because they teach you to be mindful, which gives you less anxiety. So it kind of just like teaches you to live in the moment because most neurodivergent people, we just like live in anxiety. And even people with HD, ADHD can't sit still. So, and it's just like chaotic in our brains, chaos all day. So those are the therapies that have helped me. But it's really like trial and error. There's so many different therapies, even therapies that are not like um traditionally for autistic people might help. So what might work for one person may not work for another person. So it really is about the individual person, the individual child.
Yeah, I totally agree. And through our journey in this process, I don't think that there's one all be all solution to fix everybody's autism diagnosis. Or and that's the thing, I think that that's what I just said there. We say it in a mindset of it needs to be fixed, and it's so
Yeah,
wrong, like it's
that
so wrong.
that's why we
It
don't support ABA therapy, because they're trying to fix you. They're trying to
Yes.
force neurotypical behaviors on you. So that's, basically why we don't support it. That's probably why I don't remember what the ABA stands for, because I just pushed
Yeah.
it out of my mind so
Yeah,
much.
you're right. It's a very selfish way of, you need to operate in what I
Hmm.
consider normal
Yeah.
or what I consider socially acceptable,
Hmm.
and not exploring what this person has to bring to the table in forms of perspective and communication. And it's just such a miss that I think a lot of educators and evaluators and behavior therapists miss on this. It's how can we get these kids to operate with the rest of society rather than like exploring and accepting and acknowledging and celebrating what is unique about it. So what did this show up for you earlier in life prior to your diagnosis?
Well, since I'm an artist, like it kind of slipped through the cracks because, artists, we're eccentric and we stay and live in our own world. So as a child, I was very withdrawn, but I was always like drawing and just doing my own thing. So they were like, "Oh, well, she's not shy, but she just likes to be left alone and she likes to draw." So that was like even before kindergarten. So in school, I got bullied and I never really had a lot of friends. But I had art, that was my escape. So that's what I gravitated toward. Um, then I got into all types of art programs. My parents put me into therapy, so I did theater for a while. So it's like any type of artistry is what I escaped. That's where I went to escape. So again, they're just like, if she's an artist, she's carefree like an artist. Artists do their own thing. She's learning lines. She's memorizing manuscripts. Just leave her. So it was like I felt like they just thought that I'm just like engulfed in artistry. My teenage years, I started a dance program, and then I was still working with the theater group. So it was always art. I ran to my art. I got lost in my art. I hid behind my art. So I believe that's why it was not caught by anybody. I believe the teachers just thought I was shy, or it was just like neglect on the teachers' end. But so I think that's why it just nobody caught it. Like my grandmother, she was so protective. Anybody said anything like, "Well, I said hi to her and she didn't say hi back," she just used to be like, "Y'all, well, y'all better leave her alone." So, it just kind of like it was always like she didn't say hi. I said hi to her. She didn't say hi back. But I just used to like, get some pens, some crayons, some paper, and just go get in my own little world and draw. Everybody used to think I was just a picky eater when it was just like I can't tolerate this texture of food. Um, I didn't like loud music. I didn't like crowds. So they just used to be like that. Well, that's just how she is. So, and then back then it was like we haven't even heard about autism. So it was just like we don't know what's wrong with her.
I'm curious because you said when you got this diagnosis that you were like, that's not me.
Yeah.
That's, and I'm curious, where are you at with it now? And was there a tipping point where you owned it rather than feared it?
Yes, like after about a year, because I was still like I was torturing myself. But once I accepted it, I feel like I felt like it was like the most beautiful thing. And I just started going online and trying to research it, but when I was doing like research, it was like I was not seeing a lot of black faces. I definitely wasn't seeing a lot of black women, and like now, I'm seeing a little bit more. So there's progress being made, but there's still a long way to go. But that's why I decided to start advocating, because I didn't see enough black faces. And this was about 3 years ago. Um, you can I don't really count the pandemic because I wasn't really doing much during the pandemic, but trying to stay sane like everybody else, trying to stay busy, find ways to keep myself busy. But yeah, I didn't see anybody that was like me. So if I didn't see anybody that was like me, little black autistic girls definitely didn't see anybody that was like them. So, you don't want the generation coming up to be put through what you're put through. So once I accepted it, life just became easier.
Yeah, that's really beautiful that you say that, and I appreciate that, and that's why I wanted to talk to you, because there aren't a lot of black faces out there in the community talking about this. And is this something that you maybe felt empowered by in any way, or was it something that you kind of feared until you learned more about? And how did learning about that help you? Because I'm thinking
Um,
about my daughter here, and when we were going through ADHD evaluations, for some reason she did not want ADHD. She was like, I don't want it. You have it. It's weird. I don't understand it. But when we got the autism diagnosis and we started talking to her about that and how we notice that it maybe shows up in her life, and she actually seems to really kind of latch onto it and be empowered by it, and really seem to have some like, oh, that's me moments. Oh, hey, I do that, or I have trouble with that, or that is difficult for me, or oh, I am good at that. And it really kind of seemed to give her some autonomy of like, I can own this. Even when we were looking at some of your videos and talking about you beforehand, and I said, yeah, she has autism just like you. You were just diagnosed with that, right? And she said, yeah. Is that why she's so good at drawing and being creative? And I said, yeah. That's probably your guys' superpower. And it was just a really kind of cool thing to see as a parent, to see her almost get excited about it, or just to feel some like attachment to it, or like reflecting to her own self and be like, oh, that's maybe what's going on, or wow, okay, that it it's not something that something is quote unquote wrong with me, or different. It's just that now I have a way of identifying with it and understanding it better. And I'm just curious what your maybe experience was throughout that process.
when I started to accept it, I just felt that it was just something. It wasn't just something that was a part of me. It was who I was. So you have to accept who you are, and once you accept who you are, you love yourself more. When you love yourself more, you gain more confidence, and when you have more confidence, you can speak up for yourself more. So it just made everything better. It made life more beautiful. It made me look at life differently, through a whole different lens. So you just have to accept it and learn as much about it as you can, and you can see that it's not the end of the world, and it's not a terrible thing, and everybody is different. So show up as yourself, and you'll like yourself better.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm gonna tell my daughter those exact words later today when we get off, because that was going to be my next question, is if you could go back and talk to 9-year-old Ayanna, what would you say to her in trying to understand this and to give confidence? And that was very well said and beautifully articulated. So thank you. And I think that is something that every little black girl needs to hear if they're going through this process, to celebrate this and to lean into it rather than shy away from it. And I think that that's been very empowering in our house, to try to have that sort of mentality and that sort of focus throughout this process. So I appreciate you saying that.
You're most welcome.
I really love the conversation and how it revolves around the individual. And you mentioned earlier advocating for the community and saying this type of therapy is actually not what works well for my community. And then you mentioned how when you received the diagnosis, you had a little bit of hesitation with acceptance because what you had seen up to that point maybe didn't exactly align with who you are. So I love the ability to have a community of like-minded people who also have their own individual advocacy points that they want to make for themselves. And then, of course, scale it out and say, this is what the community feels in response to what somebody who doesn't quite understand looking in what we experience. So when you go about advocacy for the community and advocacy for yourself and then advocacy for women of color in this, what does that look like? How do you navigate around advocacy, and what has been the response from others, and how would you like them to kind of maybe evolve their understanding of your advocacy for the individual?
Well, I always tell everyone that I'm basically a self advocate, but a lot of people can relate to what I'm saying, and I have a lot of support from the actually autistic community. I have a lot of support from parents because they always tell me that I help them understand what their child is going through. It gets hard sometimes, you get the trolls who have a lot of things to say. They're like, look at black women making everything about themselves, and I'm like, okay, just go away. But then you have like the parents who tell me that I give them hope for their child. So things like that is what keeps me going, because it's not always smiles and pretty pictures and um just happiness all the time. It does get hard and exhausting and overwhelming, but you have the things that keep you going, just like with anything else. I have a lot of support from the autistic community. I have a lot of allies. Of course, I have all the support from my dad. He was learning while I was learning. He also apologized, and I have his permission to share with this. He also apologized to me for just thinking that I was being mean to people when I was just having anxiety and I was overwhelmed. So he's very apologetic about when he wasn't understanding my behaviors.
Yeah, that's powerful because you know, man, I think we fall into that trap as parents in trying to understand what's going on, or we have all these external opinions coming on of what normalcy looks like, or what a good family should look like, or a functional, healthy dynamic. And when we let those opinions in, it's so easy to just drown in that, and to forget that it looks different in each family, and especially with neurodivergent, when it shows up in a family, we have to be attentive. And I'm just speaking through my own experience of when we did get this 88-page report about the evaluation process, and we talked with the evaluator on the phone for 2 hours about all of these things that showed up. And it was very humbling and eye-opening to me as a parent, and just this aha moment of like, oh my gosh, I've been so strict or disciplinary on some of these things, or wanted her to react or respond a certain way, because things need to get done. Where parents were trying to go from A to B and not have to go through Z, Y, and X on the way there. And sometimes that can get difficult when you have sensory issues and you're 20 minutes late because pants on the skin can cause these certain things. And
Tags.
we're not, or socks, gosh, we have the argument about socks every single day. It never changes, no matter, and we always have to explain why socks are important, but it's always a thing, and sometimes
That's
we
why
can
I
just
like the
get,
summer.
yeah. My daughter too, it's sandal season,
Yes.
so, but when we don't have an understanding as parents, it can get frustrating and maddening, and we can get lost in the impatience of it. And when I went through this report and heard all of these things, and this is why, and this is how it shows up in your daughter, it was just like, oh my God, I've been missing the ball on this. Why would I've been so hard, and it was humbling to just see that this is just how her brain operates, and it's not her job to get on my page about it. And like we said, teach her, neurotypical ways. As the parent and as the maturer one that has a maybe bigger understanding about what's going on, I have to be the one to pause it, restate the question, do it with a different tone of voice or in a way that encourages her curiosity and understanding of the world, rather than saying just like, no, do it because I said so, or X, Y, or Z. And so I'm really, it's great, and to hear that your dad has been so, taking the accountability with that, and apologizing that, us millennials, our parents' generations aren't known for that. So it's always encouraging and really refreshing to hear when a parent can really accept responsibility and accountability for that, and show that they want to have a different way of communicating with you and analyzing the world.
Yeah, because sometimes also we don't know what's right and what's wrong because I was actually bullied by a teacher. She choked me when I was in the second grade. She was a substitute teacher. So like my regular teacher knew that I learned differently. So the substitute teacher got frustrated with me because I was asking a lot of questions. She didn't understand that I learned differently. So by the end of the day, she was so frustrated with me because I asked so many questions, and she just choked me, and she was like, "I'm tired of you," and she just choked me. And I didn't know that that was wrong. I just knew that I didn't like the way it felt. So I didn't tell my dad. One of my friends actually ended up telling him, and they went and they handled the situation. But I didn't know it was wrong. So when I was speaking to one of the mothers that I'm in communication with, I told her, I was like, sometimes when you ask your child how their day was, maybe ask them, how did people make you feel? Because I knew I didn't like the way it felt, but I didn't know that if she was right or wrong.
Yeah, I think keeping conversations in our household around feelings, and like maybe defining what those feelings are, or how they make you feel, or what exactly the emotion is, or what the trigger was for that emotional response, has been really important. I think that like through the most successful conversations we've had in our house has been around that. It's not you need to do this, or this is right, or this is wrong. It's been like, well, let's talk about your feelings, how that expresses itself, why you're feeling that, how big of a feeling, may be necessary for this thing, or why you're feeling that type of emotion for this kind of thing, and just helping our kids understand the things that they're feeling and why has been really crucial into understanding, why we have these moments, or how to get through them when they may be feeling overwhelming. You know, so I just like, what when you're maybe having an emotional fit, or something, where something seems too overstimulating for you, what are the things that help you calm you down, or kind of help you regulate in your own way?
Well, I'm more of a shutdown person than a meltdown person. So when I have shutdowns, that's exactly what I do. I shut down. Sometimes all I need is a nap. Sometimes I just need to be like completely left alone. And I'll read, I'll draw, of course, just do the things that keep me relaxed. Um, if meltdowns, like I told people, I was like, my meltdowns just look like I'm cursing somebody out. So like everybody that knows me, they know that I don't just go around cursing people out. And they're like, no, she's having a meltdown. Just leave her alone. So with a meltdown, you just have to let the person see it through. Um, Trying to like negotiate or tell them to calm down, that just makes it worse. You just really have to let them get through it, unless they're trying to harm themselves, and that's when you step in. But those types of things, they're uncontrollable behaviors. And as long as, we're not trying to hurt ourselves, we just have to get through it on our own.
And how did you uncover what things worked for you? Did you kind of just
Um,
know or know thyself, or was there maybe a process or someone to kind of help you determine what those things looked like and how they helped you?
well, I've always had the shutdowns. When I had the meltdowns, people were just like, she's so disrespectful, and why does she talk to people like that, not knowing they were meltdowns? So I've always known that I've had these fits or whatever, but now I know there were meltdowns, and I've always had the shutdowns, but it was just like, why am I so tired? Why am I excluding myself from the world? So I knew because I've always had them, and I always knew that like what helped me. So, it's kind of by accident. I just always knew it worked because I've always had them. So now that I know their meltdowns and shutdowns, I had already knew what helped me because I already had them. I just now knew what they were.
How does somebody show care and compassion for you when you are receiving maybe overstimulation and you're trying to manage via a shutdown or meltdown? What helps you feel seen and heard?
Just like maybe a conversation about maybe what brought it on. But sometimes you don't know what brings it on, and sometimes it can be brought on by nothing. But me personally, I can kind of feel it coming on. I can feel when I'm being overstimulated, so I'll ask for the space, So most of the time, I'm given the space. There are the narcissists and the people who are like, no, you need this, you need that, and then they pay for it. But I can usually feel when I'm being overstimulated. It can be for no reason. It can be something coming up that I'm anxious about, but I know that I need to remove myself and be by myself. So I know, and I ask for space. So, and then if you don't give me the space, you pay for it. So,
And how did you kind of come to that realization about yourself and knowing those triggers in yourself and needing to ask for the space? Because I ask this because selfishly, because this is something that in conversations with my daughter I see. I struggle with articulating to her that I'm not trying to get the message across like don't feel your feelings or you can't feel your feelings or feel them in a different way. Yeah, I don't want to create any sort of like shame or blame when she has meltdowns, but I do feel like it's my job as a parent to try to convey or communicate in as healthy way as possible. It's that it's okay to feel the emotions, but maybe the way that we display them can have some consequences or be destructive in our personal lives. So getting her to realize that without the shame part is something that we really have to pause and articulate on, because I I don't want her to lose friends or have destructive consequences because she doesn't realize that just vomiting emotions can have those consequences.
if she can feel them coming on, and if she can feel like she's getting overstimulated, you can speak to her and tell her to remove herself, and hopefully she's able to do that. Hopefully she has an accommodating teacher that can give her a quiet space so she can not blow up on her friends, because it's an uncontrollable behavior. But if she knows she's getting overstimulated, she can ask for the space, and hopefully, her teacher can accommodate her, even if she's just going to the nurse's office.
So I had a question that's been kind of just on my mind for a bit here is so what are some limitations placed on like specifically the autistic community and then in the case of women who have ASD, what's a limitation placed on that community that you would like to see change?
Well, sometimes people like put limitations on you just when they learn you're autistic. They automatically assume that you can't do anything. Like everybody's care needs are different, so everybody is going to be able to do different things. Like, people automatically assume that I don't drive just because I'm autistic, but that's not the reason I don't drive. I don't drive because I can't go like a year without being unconscious. So don't automatically assume that autism, they put the blame on what people can't do, everything on autism, and that's not why. They assume that like autistic people can't get jobs. When they hear autism, you can't do nothing. You're never going to achieve anything. You're not going to go far in life. And there are autistic doctors, nurses, lawyers, astronauts, like every field. There are autistic people. You just may know it. They may not know it themselves. So the limitations are just that. As soon as they learn you're autistic, they limit you. And I always tell people, don't let anybody limit you, and don't limit yourself.
Do you find that that limitation creates a little bit of like, like confidence issues about owning the diagnosis, talking about the diagnosis? Do you see maybe in the community people, are they willing to share that diagnosis with people outside of the community, or is it something that they maybe kind of shy away from because of the stigma or the cultural ramifications?
I heard a lot of people, and I've spoken to a lot of people who um they're like closeted autistics. So like outside of like the autism community, like they're some of them are teachers. Their students don't know they're autistic. Their coworkers don't know they're autistic. So a lot of them don't feel confident enough to tell like their families even, and other people in their friend circle. They don't have like the confidence to tell anybody else that they're autistic. And some people proudly flaunt that they're autistic, like me. But sometimes even when I told my friends that I was autistic, they was like, "We black," and I was like, "Okay, but I'm autistic." But when I was talking to them, they was like, "Well, it does kind of make sense now." And I was like, "Okay, it is kind of making sense, right?" So, I feel
well,
like there is some shame with some people, like there was
well,
with me that first year.
and what do you tell people that maybe express some of that shame to you? Because, like you said, you seem pretty vocal and confident about it. Being an
Yeah,
advocate,
yeah.
you talk about it. Yeah. So maybe what would you maybe say to somebody that's maybe feeling a little bit of shame?
I just basically share my story. You don't want to put pressure on people and tell them how to live their life, because people might get like disowned by their family. You don't really know what people have going on. You don't know how their family life is. Some cultures don't like accept you if you have disabilities or if you have disorders and different conditions. So it is different with everybody. So I just basically tell my story and share certain videos of mine and tell them there's nothing wrong with being autistic. If you can be yourself, then be yourself.
One thing I wanted to touch on too that I heard you say earlier that I really wanted to celebrate was the piece about like going out and getting involved in the community, and searching those sort of resources and that support and understanding, because JJ and I do a parenting call for kids with neurodivergent stuff, and we have a lot of parents that come from a lot of different aspects of life, between ADHD and ODD and autism, all three levels, to all sorts of different neurodivergent stuff that comes from all walks of life. And some of the things that I've heard a majority of those parents talk about is, well, now that we have this diagnosis, I don't want to enroll them in some sort of program or school or class with other neurodivergent kids because they may not be on the same level as my neurodivergent kid, and I don't want them picking up bad habits or tendencies from these other neurodivergent kids. So a lot of parents almost seem to want to shy away from getting involved in the community and getting that support because, again, they have this preconceived stigma to it from the 80s definition of what autism looked like in Rain Man or whatever, and they
Oh
think that
yeah,
that
that's
just goes
so
all
irritating.
over. Yeah,
That's
and
so irritating. the Rain Man thing, like when I told some people that I'm autistic, they're like, "Oh, well, I saw Rain Man," and I'm like, "Well, I'm not Rain Man." That like the Rain Man thing, they need to leave that alone.
Yeah, yeah, and well, and it's evolved so much over the years to where when Rain Man came out, that's what autism was, right?
Mhm.
That was it, and now we know that it's a broad spectrum, that goes a lot of different neurodivergent traits from ADHD to Asperger's to nonverbal, and it ranges, and it's all the same thing in just different areas of it. And I think it's just such a miss that parents miss in giving their kids the resources and support that really could be beneficial, because we do have this societal preconceived notion of what it is and how it should show up. So when you hear maybe a new diagnosis of your own kid, and you just automatically go to one side of the spectrum and say, well, this is life now, rather than being open-minded and curious to, again, what other people may be experiencing on different areas of the spectrum, and what those experiences can teach us for positive resources and healthy outlets for helping our own kids and in our own situations with ASD.
I feel that also, um, since they're like a lot of the time it's just their ignorance and they don't really mean any harm. And since they only have one image of autism, which is Rain Man, if they did like a little bit of research, they'd see other people who are autistic who are flourishing in life. Go search the actually autistic hashtag on social media. You'll find all types of autistic people in all different types of situations and careers. So just getting the diagnosis and going nuts and saying you don't want your kid around other autistic kids. Well, maybe somebody might feel that way about you and might not want their kid around your child. So, how do you feel about somebody saying that about your child? So, um, people can be a little more open minded and things will work out better.
Yeah, honestly, I think that this process has been a beautiful experience for me, because it has taught me to be more accommodating and open-minded, where JJ and I were just talking about this a couple of episodes ago with his little one getting excluded from community events or friends houses because of the way that Cohen's neurodivergence shows up in social situations. And they've experienced some bullying and not being invited back to the party, kind of thing. And we've really gotten into what a shame it is that and I've fallen victim of this before. Ayana, I'm gonna be honest with you. My ignorance and my inexperience in this field up until now, I was kind of in the mindset of, like, when you see a kid maybe having an emotional meltdown or a fit or overstimulation, and how that expresses itself, I was in the mentality of, what's wrong with that kid,
Or like
you
give
know
that kid a beating, pop
yeah,
that kid,
that kid's not
get it
getting
together.
disciplined. And that's something that I
Yeah,
deal with my family too, is and before we got this diagnosis, that they would see our oldest behavior and say, you're not being strict enough with her, you got to be
yeah.
harder on her.
I feel
And I was
like
like, I don't think that that's the answer. I think that there's something else going on here that needs attention rather than more discipline.
yeah,
And
people should definitely, if you're out in the store, like if you're in Target and you see a child having a hard time, don't just stare or don't make comments. Maybe you can ask the parent, is there anything I can do? And if they say
yeah.
no, keep going, mind your business, keep going.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel a lot of shame and guilt thinking about some of my, some past interactions where there was maybe a kid that was a little bit different, or operated in a different way, and I maybe just wrote him off as being weird or difficult, and
I
now
think
here I
everybody has done that because I've done that. I've like since I have like the sound sensitivities, if a kid would scream and I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, shut that kid up," just because of like for my own selfish reasons because I couldn't deal with the sound. But now I'm a little more like apologetic because I know that people have things going on, and if I see a child and I'm like, well, maybe there's something going on there. Maybe he he's like has a neurodivergency or some other type of challenge where he can't control it, he or she. And I'm a lot more sympathetic, and because it's hard for the parents too, and the whole situation is hard for everybody. So now that I know more about disabilities and children who are different, people who are different, I'm more educated now. So um, I can give my sympathy, and I know, like now, I can kind of tell when something's different, or when someone's different, or there's might be something there. So I'm not like, shut that kid up. I just put my noise canceling headphones on and go on about my way.
Yeah, and I just want to honor you and celebrate you and the lens that you bring to the world and your advocacy. It's quite a remarkable thing. We are very grateful for that. And
Thank you
you know,
so much.
we talked about ignorance and fear, and I think the two of those sometimes play a similar role in people, and they want to be in their safe space. And my brother, he's nonverbal autistic, and so he very much has a certain type of structure to his day that creates a certain sense of comfort for him. And when he was young, he was definitely trying to explore the world, and it was a lot of challenge for him. And we were not understanding. In fact, I shared this in a previous episode. Uh, this wasn't long after that Rain Man movie had come out, and the local newspaper decided to interview my parents with my brother there, and then the headline was "Autism Not Just in the Movies." So even that headline, you could tell, was a headline that had a lot of loaded concepts of ignorance and fear
Yeah.
to it. And then my grandparents came to visit, and my grandfather had a very old school mentality on how children need to be disciplined. And of course, he was going based on already a large level of ignorance toward even just the population, as a whole. And so my brother acted in a certain way because he was, what I believe, overstimulated in the moment. So he wasn't trying to act out and be rebellious. He was acting on his impulses. He knew how to cope. And my
Yeah.
grandfather hit him, spanked him. And then my brother started crying. And I, as a little kid who was very young, witnessing this, I said, he doesn't know what you're doing. He doesn't know, he doesn't understand why you're hitting him. And my grandpa said, well, he needs to learn. And of course, especially looking back now, I can say that that was a form of ignorance, something that he's applying because he was afraid of my brother and what he didn't understand about my brother. So I guess the question that I'm trying to ask for anybody is, how do we, especially in advocacy, how do we get that message out there? That beautiful thing that you said, is everybody has their own path that they're on. How do we not only accept that, but maybe show curiosity and kindness and compassion toward that? You mentioned the hashtag on social media. That's great, but a lot of people don't seek that out until they find themselves in a place of discomfort. And even then, sometimes they retreat rather than show curiosity.
Um, I think that asking more questions instead of making assumptions. If you have, I mean, I feel like everybody knows somebody who's disabled. Ask, can you help? And just that alone, you'll learn just from that experience. Just try to find ways to educate yourself, even if you have absolutely no reason to educate yourself because you don't know a disabled person. But most people do know somebody who's disabled. And with your brother, you said about structure, that's absolutely true. I have a to do list every day, and it's just called my daily routine. And if I miss one thing off of it, like when my dad is around, I'm like, I didn't do this today off of my to do list. And he's like, okay, calm down. So what was it that you didn't do? And I'll tell him, and he was like, okay, well, just put it back on there for tomorrow and try again tomorrow. So, he understands, and but he knows how to speak with me and get me to understand more things. But structure is very important, and with your grandfather coming over, that interrupted his structure because grandpa's not there every day. You're here at my house interrupting my structure. So he wasn't misbehaving. You came and you interrupted his structure. So it was a very big ignorance.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that your father has, really taken the time and dedication to understand you as a person. Just simply saying, let's put that on the list for tomorrow. What I hear there is, I see you, I hear that this is important to you. I don't want to skip that. I want to make light of that and, showing that to you and acknowledging you. I think that's incredibly valuable. And I want everybody who listens to kind of take a step back and say, what is also going on here with this person? Why does this matter? And they matter to me. I want to understand them at a deeper level, not just simply because, hey, I'm upset because I didn't get my way. No, there's probably something, a message underneath
Yeah,
there, that they have a story within them that they're trying to explain about what makes their life comfortable, joyful, happy, and how do we be compassionate toward that?
he's very like overprotective. Even when people, because some questions are like, it's okay to ask questions, but it's the way you ask them. Because I can't cross the street by myself, and people just find that like so unbelievable, and they're like, she can't cross the street by herself. But it's because I have like a sensory delay, so I think that like I think I have 20 seconds for the car before the car comes, but I don't have that much time. The car's already here, so he's just making sure that I don't get hit by a damn car. So people just make assumptions and they don't want to be educated. Like if you ask why, we'll probably tell you why. So, I mean, pretty much everybody knows that I have sensory delays, that I have like developmental delays. I'm not on the level of my peers. So you can just ask us. We don't have a problem telling you. We don't have no shame. We do some things to avoid bullying because, I had enough bullying in school, always pick last for things or not picked at all. Um, that people knew I was different, so they'd go tell me to do things because they knew I didn't know right from wrong. So he's very protective and he does not play.
Yeah, I really love to hear that dynamic between the two of you, because what it tells me is, like, we don't have to be perfect to have really meaningful connections with our kids. Some accountability and taking responsibility for and owning growth and learning, right? Like, can play a really big part in our relationship with our kids. So I just loved hearing that piece about it, and it wants me to, give myself some more grace, and my parents too, for not understanding this, or not being fully equipped uh, to emotionally handle it at all times, whether it was me as a kid with my ADHD, or grandkids now with ASD. So I really love that part of your story, and want to just say thank you so much, Ayanna, for coming on. I really
You're
I,
most
I
welcome.
I was sitting at the edge of my seat, and I was just waiting to just like interrupt JJ and bulldoze over at him with my questions, because this was really exciting for me, because like I said, this is a new journey for our family, and there are not a lot of proud Black women faces out there. So to be able to educate myself and give my daughter some of that means a lot to me. So thank
Thank
you
you so
for
much.
thank you for coming on and taking the time out to do this today. I really got a lot from it, and I hope JJ and our listeners did too.
Thank you. And it doesn't interrupt my to-do list. I still have plenty of time to get everything done.
Great, great.
Well, can I ask one more question, Ayana?
Absolutely.
I had this one question that I apologize if it's maybe a little bit too generic, but is there a message to the world that you can think of that needs to be heard, felt, and repeated?
Yes, tune down the ignorance, and open your mind. Everybody's different, not just every autistic person is different. Everybody in the world is different. No two people are the same. Even identical twins are different. And people are like, no, identical twins are absolutely, no, even identical twins are different. No two people in the world are different. Your differences is what make you beautiful. So tune down the ignorance and open your mind. You never know like who you're missing out on just because you're being ignorant.
There's a hip hop group that their album, I just love the title of it, is it's unique just like everyone else. And I appreciate that, because you're right. Everybody brings something special to the world, and I love your lens. It's a beautiful lens that not only did you use for advocacy, but you know how to create something beautiful in front of you, whether it's on a canvas, on a shirt, or just
Thank
as
you.
part of your message. So I really honor that.
Thank you so much.
I love that message because I think every time we end an episode, we always hammer home a theme, and I think the most common repeated theme that we hammer home is curiosity. If JJ and I had to boil our dad coaching down to one, the most important thing, I think that's what we talk about most on this podcast is curiosity. And being open to the world and to emotions and people's opinions. So thank you for saying that and sharing that. That's
You're
very
welcome.
powerful. Is Before we go, is there anything that if people want to get in touch with you or ask you questions or just connect with you in any sort of way? Is there somewhere where they can go to do that?
I'm sure. I'm all over social media. If you want to connect with me, it's phenomenally autistic all across social media. I have an Amazon author page where all of my books are that I've illustrated. If they're not up there, that just means they're out of print. But I'll be putting some new stuff up there soon. But it's phenomenally autistic, my Amazon author page. But anywhere that there's a social media that I have an account, it's phenomenally autistic.
Great. And not to worry, guys. We'll have all that information in the show notes for you and how to connect with Ayanna and some links to some of her books and stuff too, if they're not already taken off the shelves. So thank you very much, Ayanna, for all of this information and for your time and just your beauty. Please continue just radiating in the world and doing what you do because it's vitally important to give voices and faces to other little girls, and
Thank
other
you.
little girls of color and other people going through this process. So thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for listening. As always, we appreciate your support, and you can connect with us by going to our homepage at the adhdads.com. You can sign up for our email list there, and you can get some of our resources that we've created for you guys to, be more intentional fathers and help connect with your kids and your wives and loved ones and spouses. So we do that. Reach out to us. We love to hear from you. Thank you again, Ayanna. This has been the ADH Dads, and I'm your host, CJ.
I'm JJ.
And we'll see you next week. Thanks.